Hey, this is Korte, and in this week's Atlantic edition of Forerunners, the Surfline podcast dedicated to helping you score waves, we'll break down the pumping surf that graced the northeastern U.S. and Caribbean the past few days and answer whether there is more where that came from later in March. But first, lead forecaster Mike Watson and I will discuss what we can expect for waves up and down the East Coast through the middle part of the month and whether we think it might be worth pulling the trigger for a spring break trip down to the Caribbean. If you are a bit limited on time, here's how things break down in this week's pod. And if you're not already a premium member, go to surfline.com/Forerunners podcast for a 15-day free trial of Surfline Premium. At the top of the pod, lead forecaster Mike Watson will walk us through why high pressure over the Atlantic isn't necessarily a bad thing depending on where you are in Florida. We'll also get into the details of the best days of surf or lack thereof for the Gulf and also the southeastern U.S. coastline. Just after the 13-minute mark, I'll discuss the Outer Banks and points northward, as it does look like a little bit of surf later this week and possibly into next week as well. Just before 27 minutes in, Mike will discuss the runaways for select breaks in the Caribbean and whether we think spring breakers will enjoy good surf down in the Caribbean over the next few weeks. Once again, I'm lead forecaster Kirk Korte, and you're listening to Forerunners, which drops weekly with the Atlantic edition on Wednesday and the Pacific version on Tuesdays.
Okay, this is Sean Collins, Chief Forecaster of Surfline, and this is, the first order of business, looking down on the Southern Hemisphere, what to expect over the next 2 weeks.
At any given moment, a perfect wave is breaking somewhere on this earth. For the surfer, the trick has always been knowing where and when to find it.
All right, I'm joined now with Mike Watson, lead forecaster and Atlantic operations manager down there in Florida. Mike, how's it going?
Pretty good, Kurt. How things going up your way on the Outer Banks?
It's a beautiful day out here, just a little lack of surf. We had our waves earlier in the week, but we'll get down to it here. What's happening down there, both on the Gulf side and the Atlantic side here? Spring break, big time to go down to Florida. I never did it for spring break. I always went on surf trips, but I guess some people do, right?
They do, and I'm with you. I prefer surf trips during spring break. During my college days. But for some people, Florida is a bit of a surf trip, and this one, at least heading into our first kind of real weekend of spring break, there's some surf on the cards for the east coast of Florida, much of the east coast of Florida. If you're on the Gulf side, really not looking that great, unfortunately. Not a whole lot of surf on offer there, so you as well, surfers over there in that region, Panhandle, Tampa, St. Pete area, Sarasota, Bradenton, you guys are going to want to head on over and look at the East Coast forecast. We have some pretty fun little surf on offer. We've had this high pressure ridge slide off over the Western Atlantic region, and winds around this have sent us some surf to us. We're seeing that on the offshore buoys. That's going to propagate in over the next couple of days for us and keep some waves in the water. And on top of that, Kurt, we have a World Surf League event going on in Cocoa Beach this weekend, starting on Thursday. So we've got a men's WSL event and a women's junior pro. So a lot of things going on here over the weekend.
Nice. You mentioned the buoys, and specifically for Florida, what are your kind of indicator buoys? What do you like to look at when you're looking at like a trade soul event like this?
Well, Kurt, that's a secret. I can't tell that. Frankly, really, I look at all of them. There's ones I use for certain things to give me indicators of how to really nail down a sea state. We've got several lined up out here. We've got the Northeast Bahamas buoy. We're going to want to look at that. We're also going to want to look at the East Bahamas buoy. It gives us a little bit more bigger picture and breadth of what the wave field looks like out there, even though that East Bahamas buoy is tucked behind the islands, and that swell is really only going to impact the Bahamas, unfortunately. But yeah, we're looking at East Canaveral buoy, 120 miles out. Then we bring it on down to the Canaveral buoy. But one of the main things that I'll look at right now, and a lot of people don't see, is some of our back end tools we have, comparison of what the models are saying, the computer models are saying, versus what's happening in reality. And that's kind of one of our go-tos. I think all of us go to immediately. So that's a very powerful thing we're looking at. And right now we're pretty much on track with what computer models are saying in there. So we're expecting several fun days of surf. User-friendly surf at that. So those that are lesser experienced, maybe you're looking to get your first wave out there at one of the surf schools over spring break. Not a bad time to be doing that.
So with a trade swell event like this, I know you mentioned that the East Bahamas buoy, some of that swell is going to be impacting the Bahamas, and of course that blocks a portion of the South Florida coastline. So kind of what kind of zone are you looking at? Let's say you're down in Lauderdale or something like that, and you need to drive north to find some waves. How far are we kind of thinking to go? Is it like a Treasure Coast thing, or is it something a little further north, or kind of what's the kind of breakdown of where we would find rideable surf on a situation like this?
That's a great question, and it becomes really important. We had some surf down in the South Florida region from our system earlier in the week, but now the swell's trended more east and even some more east-southeast. So yeah, that island shadow comes into play. So surfers, Miami, Fort Lauderdale area are going to have to travel up some. Even on this direction, we'll see some shadowing into a lot of the Treasure Coast spots. So they won't even be as big as we'll see once we hit the Space Coast north. That's when we start to get out of that shadow, really get out of that east-southeast shadow. Even at times on even harder east-southeast, we'll even see smaller surf down towards Sebastian Inlet and bigger surf up towards the Cocoa Beach region when that kicks into play. But yeah, for the most part, you're going to want to look around the northern Treasure Coast region is probably your general starting point, and then look north of there for a bit more of the swell. Unfortunately, South Florida you're going to have onshore winds and a little bit of wind chop down there, but really just not a whole lot conducive for surfing. So yeah, I think surfers down there, you're going to want to look head up. At least start. The minimum starting point is probably going to be mid Treasure Coast, but my best estimation is I would even go a little further north of there, around maybe take a look at Fort Pierce. You can check out the HD cam there ahead of time and see what's happening there, and then head north. Another thing to consider too is we're going to have these mid to late AM trending higher tides. So you're going to want to seek out in the morning if you're looking up sunrise surf. A lot of spots should be okay handling that tide, but we will be getting progressively deep along the Space Coast. There's some Treasure Coast spots like Fort Pierce that prefer a higher tide. So if you're kind of a little bit late to the party, it's going to be definitely a spot you're going to want to check out, and you'll have plenty of time to see that on your HD cam, on the HD cam that we have live on the site, and check that out. You can, see what's kind of happening out there, see what kind of rides guys are getting.
So basically you're saying don't party like Mike Watson 1998 style. You want to get up a little early, get that incoming tide for most of the spots there.
Well, Kurt, in 1998, I was a bit younger. I could go all night and still surf all day. Not so much these days.
I was thinking back, today actually marks 15 years since I started at Surfline. I started March 11th, 2005. And I think back of, kind of how things have evolved. And I you may remember this. I can't remember if we did one surf fight for the whole state of Florida back then, or if we actually had it broken up into North, Central, and South. But it's kind of crazy to think that the changes that we've put in place, as we talk about, really honing in our messaging to our users and kind of dialing in our surfers and let people know exactly how far north they have to go. We've broken down some of those regions from what we historically have done. And the most recent breakdown was up there in North Florida, where we separated, basically it was from, the Georgia, Florida border all the way down, into Volusia County, and we've broken that up now. So to try to hone in our users, and I know you were instrumental part of doing that. So do you want to discuss the value in us having that and kind of what it means for the Florida surfer?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we started, there might even been one or two heights, maybe even three for the whole Florida region, and we're a big coast, so really breaking things up into chunks. I mean, there's a lot of difference. There can be a lot of difference even in Brevard County between maybe what Satellite Beach is seeing and down towards the inlet. For instance, on a northwest wind, be better. You're better suited to head up to the more east facing stretch of coast in Brevard County versus down the inlet where that stretch of coast is more northwest to northwest oriented to southeast. So there's a lot of changes that can happen in Florida over small distances. We're dealing with islands. We're dealing with some shallower spots along the coast. We're dealing with some shadowing. Sometimes we'll see like the First Coast region might be a little bit more shadowed on a northeast swell there and see smaller surf, where an area like Volusia County, some of those standouts like New Smyrna love a northeast swell, and they'll really amplify it. So we can see quite a difference in wave heights between those two areas. And this really not only helps us better communicate to our user, it also it makes it easier on the forecaster to come up with a surf height that's representative, communicates what's happening. And the reality is, in Florida, we have a lot of surfers driving. I've done it. I put hundreds of thousands of miles on these roads over the years, and as have a lot of friends and others. And so we, keeping that in mind, it was nice to be able to expand this and go to double the amount of regions we're doing specific forecasts in, with an eye towards even breaking that down further over the next year or two. We really want to dial that in. We're really sensitive to the plight of the surfer. We know that the time's important. It takes a lot of time to drive on these roads, especially this time of year. A lot of tourists here. We're pretty packed. So I think it really just helps on a lot of different fronts to have that broken up and help the surfer who's got to travel from Orlando or from Miami or from the Tampa St. Pete area, from these major metro areas. And look, they just want to get wet. They want to maximize their time in the water, and really that's the goal. That's what we're trying to accomplish and help out here. Great question. And
I do have one more thing I'd like to ask you.
Absolutely.
As far as the surf's concerned here the next couple of days. I guess I say one, it's two. What are we looking for our winds, specifically in the areas that are going to see the most of that trade swell? And then if you had one window to target here, we're recording this on Wednesday, March the 11th. If you had one day of target between, say, Thursday and Sunday, what day and what zone would that be in?
One day to target, I really don't think you could go wrong if you want a little bit bigger surf on Thursday and Friday. Those AM hours, either of those days would be good. We're generally looking at light onshore PM winds, but I mean, they're not really looking that strong, so it shouldn't impact things too much. The one thing that I did notice is maybe the weekend onshores are just a touch stronger than the Thursday, Friday. So I don't think you can go wrong on Thursday or Friday morning. If you're looking to get wet and need to maximize your time there. I think one of those days is plenty fine. And there's still a lot of opportunity over the weekend too. Again, just a little bit smaller, but plenty surfable over the weekend there. So.
Right, so we definitely have we have our high resolution wind models on the site that are hourly. Forecast, and you can really hone in kind of when that sea breeze may start to kick in, and kind of hone in on when you really want to hit the water here in the state of Florida as you party your brains out for spring break and then wash it all off with a little surf.
Exactly.
Again,
and Kurt, let me just touch one more on that. I mean, they can find that on any of the regional forecast pages under charts, you're going to find that. You'll find a menu of a regional high resolution wind. And, as you mentioned, these are really great models to pick out small, more local features like the sea breeze, things that some of the more coarse or global models don't necessarily pick up. So, yeah, that can really help you hone it in. And we cover the whole state. We run, that proprietary model in there. If you're out late, you can look and see, hey, man, I really want to surf from 8 to 11 and be ready to target that time frame.
All right. That was Surfline's very own Florida man, Mike Watson.
But hey, look, man, Florida's just one section of coast up here, and you guys just had a pretty good solid swell up there along the Outer Banks and the Northeast. I mean, a lot of good waves. I'm seeing a lot of great pictures. I saw one from Montauk that just looked absolutely mind blowing. I mean, what would you call that? At least double overhead.
Yeah. It's funny you actually mentioned Long Island. I mentioned earlier in the pod that March 11th was my first day in 2005. Well, March 12th there was actually a nor'easter that impacted the northeastern U.S. And I remember looking at the cams, and we had some reporters back then, and I was just like, I don't know how big that is. I was like, but it was my second day, so I didn't want to start dropping like 12 to 15s or anything like that in there. So I had to kind of downplay it a little bit. I think I went like 4 to 6 or something, but it was every bit of, a couple feet overhead, maybe even double overhead. So as far as the swell you're talking about, yeah, I think it was, I think nobody would call you out too much, at least on the East Coast. If you called that, a 6 to 8 or an 8 to 10 or any of those kind of things.
Well, I want to point out,
chilly to me.
Point out the Instagram post that we saw. I believe is got to be at least double overhead, and in anyone's book. And you brought up a good point. Is when I first started doing this, it's been 18 years now. I was kind of really blown away of how big it can get up in the Northeast region. It can hold some size up there. And there are times you can throw out a 15-foot and it's legit.
100%. You have a storm like the one we just had, hurricane force winds, not maybe, moving, ideally it was kind of tracking away from us for a good portion of its life as it was kind of rapidly intensifying. But, you get hurricane force winds, nice wide fetch. You're going to see every bit of double overhead surf at some of those spots that can handle it. And Eastern Long Island is one of those zones. We saw some great waves in the mid-Atlantic. They ran the Cold War on Saturday in Long Beach Island. Great waves there. The Outer Banks, I got to say, we get the reputation for having, great waves, but some of the Northeast swells that we get, they're just not very good.
Right.
I'm sure Brett's going to drop a vlog or whatever the heck here and prove me wrong.
Well, it's good for Brett, but for the average surfer, sometimes it's can be a little much. I've noticed.
There's a group of guys down there at the lighthouse that are pushing Brett right there with him.
Yeah.
Obviously he's the standout, but you have a core group of guys down there that when the lighthouse is good, they're getting some bombs. Yeah. And but for us up here, like we're on the northern Outer Banks, where I'm recording here in our Nags Head, North Carolina studio, and you just get these outer sandbars. Our water temperature is 48 degrees. I would say it's breaking out past the end of our piers, but basically every pier got ruined during Dorian, so all of them are really short now. So it's not saying much.
What was the deal with this one? Like, why didn't it pan out as far as good surf there? What would you attribute that main factor to?
Gosh, there's a couple of things. It seems like since we did our beach replenishment, a lot of the sand that they plop on the beach, which I think is the game plan, basically is eroded out and ends up kind of in your outer sandbar situation there. So it's not breaking. Ideally, what we would have is we would have it breaking pretty close to the beach and barreling and kind of peaky and not really closed out. But this swell was, I think here at one point we were seeing 17-second readings as our dominant period. And what ends up happening there is you get the waves that come in, they'll double up or they'll break way out on some of the outer shoals, or and then you find yourself sitting 150 yards off the beach, just waiting to find these shifty peaks, and it's just kind of hard to find a good one. Whereas we're used to continuous waves and getting a lot of them and getting a lot of barrels, and you start getting out there and piling around and getting lost in yourself. Sometimes it just ends up not being all that great. But once the swell dropped that down a little bit, actually the day after the peak on Monday, there were some pretty good waves around, but still our sandbars are kind of not the best at the moment. But there were some zones that were there were some good waves. So really can't complain.
I feel we're under that same beach renourishment thing right now, and they're dumping a lot of sand along the Space Coast here. That's moved around. So, that's another thing, as we know as surfers is being alert to that, and it could open up some spots and make others worse. So it just kind of puts us all on the search again for that honey hole.
Yeah, definitely. Even though we have, I think 27 cameras now here on the Outer Banks, most recent one is a new addition to our Avalon Pier, multicam there. That's actually right across the street from where I live. Still plenty of spots that you can go. There's no cam and you can surf pretty much by yourself. So
you guys heard it here. If you want to go burn Korte, you go to Avalon Pier.
You might do it once. You're not going to do it twice. I can tell you that.
So looking up that way, anyone heading into the weekend, is there what's in store up there for you guys? You got anything happening there, or up in New York or New Jersey or New England?
We have a little frontal system that's going to be impacting us. Obviously, not anything in close comparison to what we saw this past weekend or earlier this week. But there will be a little southerly wind swell. For here on the Outer Banks, you're going to want to target down on Hatteras Island on Friday. Looks like winds will trend more southwesterly, kind of the Pea Island to Rodanthe stretch, mainly surf in the waist to stomach high zone or so. So nothing all that great, but hopefully that southwesterly flow will warmer temperatures up there a little bit. As we're kind of down in the low 50s right now, but I wouldn't be surprised for it to bump back up into the mid to upper 50s here the next couple of days. Further up into the mid-Atlantic, we're going to be watching Friday afternoon too. Little southerly wind swell, winds trending more westerly over the back half of the day. We actually have sunset at around 7 p.m. now with the time change. So there's a nice little window after work if you want to start your weekend off right there on that Friday afternoon, get in the water a little bit and get a few waves. Up into the north, or up into New England, Long Island, actually first, kind of side shore, not looking like a good event there. Few waves for Friday afternoon for select spots in Rhode Island, smaller leftovers by Saturday. And up into the Gulf of Maine and Cape Cod, we're looking at Saturday there. Should be some fun little leftovers south to southeast swell and offshore winds. Small surf, rideable waves, probably pretty good for the beginners, to be honest, if you got the right gear to get out there this time of year. But something to keep you in the water, I guess, is the best way to say it.
Hey, not great surf overall compared to this last event anyway. But one of my good buddies here. I mean, this guy's a frother, and he's been surfing for decades. And like he says, man, use it or lose it. Get out there and keep those paddling arms lubed. Even if it is small. And this guy surfs. He surfs circles around a lot of people. Because that's it. He's just surfing no matter what. That's what you got to do.
It's easy to get jaded, especially when it's cold.
It sure is. And especially a lot of guys, we have so many more people who, like I grew up and look around and they got families and they got kids and there's a lot more responsibility that versus, the younger 18, 20-year-old days where, all you had to worry about was your job. It's just a lot more families that, you see and a lot more time commitments to that. And so that can easily kind of knock you off the routine, of paddling out. But, I try to live by that. When in doubt, paddle out, get out there. Cause there's never really a bad day on the water, so to speak.
It would be a bad day if you drop in on me. That would actually.
That'd be a bad day. It'd be a bad day for anyone. No one should be dropping in.
That might be the worst advice I've ever heard you give, Mike, is to tell somebody to come here and drop in on me.
Hey, at their own risk. Drop-ins happen at times and accidents are made, but.
That's right. You buy me a beer at the Stonefish Bar at Avalon afterwards. We'll have a good laugh about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I've ever dropped in on you, have I?
I mean, you got a wife and kids, Mike. I can't have you doing that.
Look, I'll be honest. All the surfs I've had with you, I've really enjoyed. It's been it's fun. You're a fun dude to surf with. So,
wow. I don't know how to respond to that. Thank you, Mike. I will say that you're talking about staying in the water and surfing. I remember we had our training here on the Outer Banks a couple of years ago, and I think we had a hard time getting the Florida guys out of the water and actually do some work. I remember you and John kind of frothing on our little northeast wind swell we had that time.
Oh yeah, it was fun, right in the honey hole, nice and warm, and yeah, I think we had a couple good days of a surf up there, super fun. Just classic peaky Outer Banks. Geez, I think I remember the swell was like 3+ at 10 or 11 seconds. A little bit of east northeast was it?
Yep, that's right in the zone that we like.
Yeah, really fun time.
The 10 at 17 doesn't really do much for us.
Yeah, but yep. And that's kind of where I was thinking of the first iteration of the Surfline Forecaster Heckle Hut. Have one of those coming out.
That's right.
I think not only is the team pretty good at forecasting, they're pretty good at talking some smack too.
I will say, yeah, we've all been around for a good amount of time now that we kind of, I mean, like we said, we've worked together for 15 years since I started. So I think it gets me riled up, and I could probably poke the bear on you a little bit too.
Yeah, we know the buttons to push for sure. But yeah, I just want to circle back and talk about, you mentioned that front sending a little bit of wind swell up there, and I don't want to leave the southeast coast out. We're talking about South Carolina and things like that, but this front's going to put a little bump in the water there as well, and even the trade swell by Thursday should put some rideable surf in the water for many areas Thursday into Friday before that starts to decline. And one interesting feature, I don't know how much it'll impact you guys up north of there, but we're just seeing a little indication we might see a little low and a little increase in wind towards the end of the weekend, late week. So just pointing that out. That's something we want to watch for potential of a little bit bigger surf along not just the southeast U.S. coast, but sometimes those little fetches can send a little northeast bump to mix into Florida as well. So just kind of one of the things that we're watching, around that Sunday, Monday time frame in there. And I don't know, did you see any impacts from that on you guys up there?
Yeah, I've been on the forecast for the northern half from the Outer Banks, basically northward, and definitely an interesting scenario here. A lot of times those systems that they kind of pinch the gradient a little bit right offshore of us here can produce kind of some shorter period, peaky little southeast to east wind swell. And depending on exactly where that sets up and kind of the next frontal system, we can get a window of kind of lighter, even better winds. So definitely eyeing that. I'm updating the forecast twice a day, every single day, all the time. So check out the premium forecast analysis and also those colored boxes, AM and PM here for the next 7 days. And I really hone in looking at kind of the Tuesday time frame for that to really impact us and potentially produce some fun surf again for us on the Outer Banks, especially northern Outer Banks and into Virginia Beach is kind of where they're going to get shut down from that southerly wind swell that I was talking about earlier on Friday.
Yeah.
So if you're in those zones, I would kind of be keeping an eye on early next week as a potential window to get a couple waves.
Nice. And, and I've been monitoring that even for the longer term because, I think like next week's like the main spring break week for many colleges and kind of eyeing it here. We got a lot of guys and gals traveling home for spring break to visit their families, and then just a lot of other people coming down to get out of the cooler weather. There's potential for even, the winds off of that to put some more surf in the water for next week. Nothing huge right now. It's not look like anything huge, but definitely fun size and keeping us surfing in Florida. So,
and I'll say another popular spring break location is down in the Caribbean. It's kind of almost a lot of people's first surf trip outside of the continental U.S. is the trip down to Puerto Rico. They've had a really great run from that same system that provided the pumping surf up in the northeastern U.S. How are things looking down in Puerto Rico here, not only for the rest of this week, but say into next week, if that is your spring break?
Well, hey, that is a great observation because Puerto Rico has been one of my spring break destinations when I was at Florida State.
Where were you there? Like 8 years, 9 years, 10 years?
I actually finished my master's degree in less than 2 years. So I was there for.
I thought they gave out 2 year degrees just to football players.
Actually,
that's free sneakers. I get confused sometimes about exactly what you give your athletes.
Free sneakers, crab legs. We do crab legs. Hey man, football players got to eat, right? And I think a lot of them eat a lot more than us. And speaking of that, you played a little football, didn't you?
Yeah, nobody gave the backup punter any crab legs. I can tell you that.
So got to get in with the running backs, the quarterbacks, the linebackers. Those guys eat, right? Or the linemen. Those guys are the big eaters, huh?
Yeah. A lot of those guys, man, it's tough to hold that weight. You'd be surprised. Like a lot of them when they retire and that sort of thing, they drop a lot of weight because they don't have to keep all that weight on.
Yeah, that's what I hear. I listen to a lot of sports radio. I like to listen to Mike Golick in the morning. He's a former defensive lineman, and they talk about that a lot and how these guys beef up and shed some pounds. But anyway, off the food stuff, I'm getting hungry. Yeah, Puerto Rico is a great spring break destination. I've found it be a great. It's really easy from Florida too. Really easy from a lot of spots, and Puerto Rico just enjoyed a really solid swell. We talked about the last podcast here, and the one thing that was kind of a downer with the swell is the winds in the front and the weather arrived along with the swell. So you really had to tuck away at some of the protected spots to maximize things at the peak of that swell. But we've now seen trade winds come down there. We're still seeing some solid surf, overhead surf today being reported. We're seeing it also on our high definition cameras. We've got cameras on the northwest side of the island over in Rincon. We call that the northwest side. And we cover both the north coast of Rincon with our Puntas and parking lots camera, and then the west side with our Maria's overview stadium effect there. We've got an overview camera and then a camera that looks into the break. So, monitoring there, we're seeing really good size surf there, even though the swell directions now start to tilt more northeast to northeast. Still plenty of rapid in there. Trade winds a bit better today, not as dicey as they have been. So some clean surf there. North coast still a little bit bigger than that. Going to watch for those trade winds to kick in today, but unfortunately, the swell itself is going to be on the way down. The good news, though, is it won't be flat along the north coast. They'll see the bigger surf heading into the end of the weekend as we transition to more of like a northeast to east-northeast trade swell in that zone in there. And generally in the morning hours is when we're looking at the lightest winds with typical east-northeast trade breezes kicking in. So heading around the corner, around the Ramey area, Surfers Beach kind of area might be somewhere you're going to want to check out if you're down there in that zone, or some other wind protected spots in there. So Rincon will still see some surf wrapping in, it looks like, to some of those more north facing spots. There's more trade swell exposed spots that can pick that up. So the direction on this is not super east. It's definitely east-northeast on it. And but the north coast is going to have plenty of surf. I mean, I don't see it going below head high over the next several days there. And just finding those wind protected spots are going to be the best option. And then we have been watching one storm up near Greenland, but not really a super great swell maker. It'll introduce just a little small, longer period pulse of swell. It looks like around the Sunday, Monday time frame. Again, not a huge one. We saw one a couple weeks back, a really strong low, and that sent like a small 1 to 2 foot at 18-second long period swell there, which was very well received. But unfortunately, this one is not looking like that did. But there's some other things on the radar. Unfortunately, that's not a lot of northwest swell on the radar. As our East Coast kind of cold front track is shunted a little bit more north and just not as robust as it's been. But
a lot of times we're talking about those kind of run of the mill south wind swells. That's not really a good scenario for. Eventually there being solid northwest swells down in the Caribbean, but
right.
It sounded to me like you just told everybody to go to Wildo. So
hey, it's a big playing field and everyone's going there anyway. So, I mean, that's probably the better zone to check out is somewhere in that area. I mean, there's a lot of room to spread out. There's a lot of waves everywhere. So,
there is.
And as always, when you're traveling and down to the islands is, let the locals have their fill, man. They live there and some of these guys only got a couple hours to surf. They're going to work. And it's just like anywhere else. Give them their space, give them their respect. And everyone has a good time. There's so many waves to be had. So, we don't like to tell people to go here exactly to this exact spot, but, when you're down in PR, I mean, this is the zone to check. And there's some protected spots, but along the north coast, if you're willing to be adventurous,
have a medallia, share a medallia.
Yeah, there you go. Bring some
motto.
Medallias down there and share and there you go.
You'll be amazed at the amount of friends.
Yep.
Amazed at the amount of friends you'll have at the end of the day.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, it blows my mind to go down there and you see, guys coming down. I get it. You're traveling there and you haven't seen waves, but that's just the price you give the locals their space and their due, man. And that's just the kind of, I mean, to me, having surf as long as I have. That's just that's 101 cardinal rule. When you're going anywhere. So, but spread out a lot of waves down that way. Even Dominican Republic, I know some people head there. Plenty of places to pick up some trade swell there as well. So, just not seeing our classic Northwest or North swells, unfortunately, but plenty something to ride.
That's all right. March historically can give us some pretty solid ones. So we'll hope that that one that we had last week is just the tip of the iceberg, and we can grab ourselves a couple more solid swells here before we head further into spring and things really start slowing down. So
absolutely,
you have
absolutely.
Anything, any final thoughts or words here as we transition out of our podcast here?
I think we've left it all on the table that I can think of, Kurt. Not a whole lot on. Just enjoy spring break wherever you're at and get some waves. And when in doubt, paddle out, man. I'll go surf.
And don't do anything Watson wouldn't. That's kind of a good rule of thumb as well.
Little tamer these days with 3 kids, but we still like to go out and have fun and mix it up a bit. So, and anyway, don't do anything Kurt wouldn't do up there. So,
well, that is a good rule of thumb. All right, I appreciate your time, Mike.
Thanks, Kurt. Everyone have a good one, and have a good rest of the week and weekend, man.
All right.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of Forerunners, Surfline's Forecast Podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Just hit the red button below or the Surfline logo in the bottom right and let us know what you think in the comments below. We might even answer back in a future podcast. For more detailed information on the surf of your local break, be sure to head to surfline.com for the full premium forecast analysis. If you're not a premium member, click on the icon on the bottom left for a free 15-day trial of Surfline Premium. That includes over 750 ad-free HD cams from around the globe, our famous 7-day colored forecast boxes, and our expert premium forecast analysis so you know before you go. Thanks again for listening.